I want you to imagine, just for a second, being this wealthy, highly educated, aristocratic youth in ancient Athens.
Oh, basically having the world handed to you on a silver platter.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you are perfectly positioned, absolutely destined by your bloodline for this glorious career in politics.
Right.
And on the side, just for fun, you write tragedies and poetry. You've got the whole world figured out.
Sounds like a pretty good life, honestly.
It does. But then you meet a guy whose mind is so incredibly blown open, so entirely radical, that you literally burn all your poems in a fire.
Wow. Just tosses them in.
Yeah, and you decide to change the entire course of human history.
It is quite the origin story. I mean, a complete pivot from a life of conventional Athenian prestige to a life of relentless and, frankly, dangerous questioning.
We are talking, of course, about Plato, widely considered the foundational thinker of the Western philosophical tradition.
Absolutely.
But, the goal for this deep dive isn't to just recite a dry list of his greatest hits. We really want to uncover the man behind the marble bust.
Right, because he was a real person, not just a statue.
Exactly. We want to understand the actual mechanisms of his thought, like why he believed what he did, the massive, spectacular real-world failures he endured, and how this one ancient Athenian ended up shaping everything.
Everything from early Islamic philosophy to, like, the scientific framework of Albert Einstein.
Yeah, it's wild, and I think it helps to humanize him right away, because even the name we know him by, Plato, that was likely just a nickname, right?
Yeah. Actually, some ancient sources, like Diogenes Laertius, they suggest his birth name was Aristocles.
Aristocles, okay.
Which means best reputation. But Plato might have just been like a locker room nickname meaning robust figure.
So they were basically calling him broad or stocky because he was a wrestler.
Pretty much, yeah.
I love that so much. He wasn't born this pristine philosopher, and yet there's that famous quote from the British philosopher Alfred North Whitehead. He said, "The safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato."
It's a staggering level of influence, truly.
It is. But the thing that always trips me up with that quote, if he's the absolute bedrock of Western thought, why is it so notoriously difficult to pin down what he actually thought?
Oh, yeah.
Like, every time I read his works, it's Socrates doing the talking. It feels like this weird philosophical ventriloquist act.
You're pointing to the ultimate historical puzzle there. Scholars actually call it the Socratic problem.
Okay.
Because in almost all of his dialogues, Plato, he never speaks in his own voice.
Not once.
Almost never. He constructs these brilliant, really intricate conversations, but the main character driving the debate is almost always his old teacher, Socrates.
Right.
So when Socrates says something profound in a Platonic text, you have to wonder, is that what the historical man actually believed before he was executed?
Or is Plato just using the literary character of his mentor as, like, a mouthpiece for his own theories?
Exactly. His own evolving, much more complex theories. It's a boundary line we still haven't fully drawn.
It adds this whole layer of mystery to everything he wrote. But before we get into the grand theories he might have been putting into Socrates' mouth, we have to understand what drove Plato away from that normal aristocratic life in the first place.
Right, the political ambition.
Because he didn't just casually choose philosophy over politics, he was essentially traumatized out of it.
Yeah, the timeline of his youth is so crucial here. Plato grew up during the Peloponnesian War, which was this massive, grueling, decades-long conflict between Athens and Sparta.
And it did not end well for Athens.
No, it didn't. As he was coming of age, in 404 BC, Sparta finally defeated Athens. And the fallout from that defeat basically dismantled the Athenian government.
Right, they lost their democracy.
Sparta installed this ruthless, oligarchic puppet regime known as the 30 Tyrants.
And this wasn't just some distant political headline for Plato either. Two of his own relatives, Croesus and Charmides, were actually members of this brutal junta.
Exactly. Yeah. And he wasn't just a bystander watching them from afar. With his family connections, they actually, courted him to be a key player in this new regime.
Which is crazy to think about.
For a young man raised to rule, the doors of power were thrown wide open. But he quickly recoiled.
I mean, you would hope so.
Yeah, the atrocities the 30 tyrants were committing, executing political rivals, confiscating property. It just horrified him.
And the absolute breaking point seems to be when this corrupt government tried to force his teacher, Socrates, to be an accomplice to murder.
Yes, that was the line.
They ordered Socrates to help seize this democratic general named Leon of Salamis for a summary execution. And Socrates refused, obviously.
Of course.
But for Plato, seeing his own blood relatives try to implicate the most moral man he knew in a state-sponsor assassination, I mean, that completely shattered his view of aristocratic leadership.
It did. But you would think the story gets a happy ending when those tyrants are overthrown, right?
You would think.
Because in 403 BC, the exiled Democrats regrouped, fought a battle where Plato's relatives were actually killed, and they restored the Athenian democracy.
And this is the crazy part, this supposed good government, the restored democracy, was the exact same administration that, just a few years later, put Socrates on trial for corrupting the youth and executed him.
The psychological impact of that, I mean, it cannot be overstated.
It's devastating.
The oligarchs tried to corrupt Socrates, and the Democrats killed him. For Plato, this proved that the issue wasn't just, a bad batch of leaders.
Right.
The entire structural foundation of human politics was rotten.
Think about it like a modern, idealistic student going to work in government. You show up, bright-eyed, and immediately witness a horrific corruption scandal involving your own family.
Right. Total nightmare.
So you wait it out, a new reformist administration sweeps in, and then that supposedly clean administration ends up prosecuting and executing the one university professor you admired most in the world.
You wouldn't just switch political parties after that.
No. You would drop out of the system entirely to figure out why human beings are so fundamentally broken.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Plato realized the system wasn't just experiencing a temporary glitch. The hardware itself was flawed.
Yeah.
The way people perceived reality, power, and ethics was fundamentally distorted. So, to fix politics, he knew he couldn't just write new laws. He had to rethink reality itself.
And to rethink reality, he gets out of town. After Socrates dies, Plato just hits the road.
He needed space.
He travels extensively, and these trips act as the crucible for his philosophical awakening. He ends up confronting this massive intellectual traffic jam between two older philosophers.
Oh, yes. He first studies with followers of Heraclitus. Now, Heraclitus famously argued that the world is in a constant state of flux.
The whole you can never step into the same river twice thing.
Exactly, because the water is always moving and changing. Therefore, permanent truth in the physical world is just impossible. But then, Plato studies the work of Parmenides, who argued the exact opposite, that the universe is eternal and unchanging, and that any change or motion we perceive with our senses is merely a biological illusion.
So you have one camp saying everything changes constantly, so you can't know anything for sure.
Yep.
And another camp saying change is a total lie, so your eyes are deceiving you. I mean, how do you build a theory of justice on top of that mess?
It's a huge problem.
But then he travels to southern Italy, and he finds the missing puzzle piece with the Pythagoreans.
He studies with Archytas, who is a brilliant mathematician and follower of Pythagoras, and the Pythagorean influence provides the exact bridge Plato needs between the chaos of Heraclitus and the stasis of Parmenides.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Because a guy agonizing over justice, the fate of the human soul, and corrupt governments, and his massive breakthrough is geometry.
It sounds weird, I know.
Like, how does knowing the angles of a triangle help you fix a broken society?
Because Pythagoras demonstrated that beneath the messy, changing physical world, there is a hidden layer of pure, unchanging, objective truth. And that truth is mathematics.
Oh, interesting.
Think about the Pythagorean theorem. A perfect triangle does not exist anywhere in nature. Every physical triangle you draw in the dirt is slightly flawed and, it'll eventually wash away.
Right.
But the concept of the triangle, the mathematical law governing it, is eternal and perfect. It never changes.
Ah, so it's almost like a digital file versus a printed photograph.
Exactly.
The physical photo you hold in your hand can fade or get water damage or it's inherently flawed. But the original digital code, the true mathematical formula of that image, is indestructible and perfect even if you can't physically touch it.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. Mathematics proved to Plato that eternal truths exist independently of human opinion or physical decay. It offered a secure bedrock. He took the absolute precision of geometry and applied it to abstract concepts like morality, which brings his entire worldview into focus through his most famous concept, the theory of forms.
The idea that the physical world we walk around in is basically just a cheap, decaying copy of a higher reality.
He completely inverts our common intuition. We usually think that if we can hold an object, it's real. Plato argues the opposite.
Because it decays.
Exactly. The physical world grasped by the senses is temporary and flawed. The true reality is the world of forms, abstract, perfect templates of everything that exists outside of space and time, grasped only by human reason.
So just like there's a perfect form of a triangle, there is a perfect form of a tape, like tableness.
Yes, table this.
But more importantly, there is a perfect form of justice and a perfect form of beauty. So what does this all mean? If we want to build a just society, we can't just look around at the flawed, corrupt democracies or oligarchies we see in front of us. We have to use pure reason to apprehend the perfect form of justice.
And to do that, you need a society governed by people who have actually developed their reason.
Right.
Plato maps this out by connecting the anatomy of the human soul directly to the structure of a city-state. He argues the soul has three distinct parts.
Okay. What are they?
Reason, which he locates in the head. Spirit, or courage, located in the chest. And appetite, our base desires, located in the belly.
It's a very literal gut feeling versus head knowledge distinction. But then he takes this internal anatomy and scales it up to design an entire civilization.
He does?
The appetite part corresponds to the workers and merchants. The spirit part corresponds to the brave warriors. And reason corresponds to the governing class, the famous philosopher-king.
Yeah, exactly. It's a direct mirror.
Hold on, though. Mapping human anatomy directly onto a city's class system, that seems incredibly rigid. It sounds like a caste system where nobody has any social mobility. Can he see how oppressive that would be to an individual's freedom?
Well, that assumes Plato valued modern personal freedom the way we do today. And he didn't. For Plato, justice isn't about liberty. It's about harmony. It means every part doing the job it is naturally best suited for, and nothing else.
Okay, I see.
If the belly tries to do the thinking, the body gets sick. If the merchants or warriors try to rule the city, the society becomes diseased.
Which explains exactly why he thought the governments of his day kept failing. He maps out this terrifying devolution of the state. He argues that a society will inevitably decay if reason isn't in charge.
Yeah, he outlines the mechanism of this collapse quite clearly. It starts in an aristocracy, which for him meant rule by the most reasonable, the philosopher-kings.
Right.
But eventually, the warrior class takes over, creating a timocracy, driven by honor and military glory.
But military glory requires resources, so honor slowly rots into greed.
And that greed turns the state into an oligarchy, ruled by the wealthy few. The oligarchs hoard resources, which inevitably creates a massive wealth gap.
As it always does.
And this breeds deep resentment among the poor until the masses revolt, creating a democracy.
Which Plato saw not as a triumph of liberty, but as the chaotic rule of the mob, driven entirely by their base appetites.
An unchecked democracy creates a chaotic power vacuum. People get desperate for order. That environment is easily exploited by a charming, ruthless strongman, paving the way for the final, worst stage tyranny.
It is a brilliant, terrifyingly recognizable forecast. But Plato wasn't content leaving the philosopher-king as just a thought experiment in a book.
No, he wanted to test it.
He genuinely believed his theoretical framework could fix a broken ruler in the real world, which led him to make a catastrophic gamble in Syracuse, Sicily.
The Syracuse disaster is the ultimate test of his political philosophy. Plato travels there and befriends a man named Dion.
Right.
Years later, Dion invites Plato back because the new ruler of the city, Dionysius II, needs a tutor. Their grand plan is to mold this young absolute dictator into a literal philosopher-king.
Spoiler alert, it does not go well.
It is a spectacular collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Dionysius II actually likes the philosophical discussions at first. He enjoys the intellectual prestige of having Plato there.
Sure, it makes him look smart.
But he lacks the moral discipline. He becomes deeply paranoid about losing his grip on power and suspects his uncle Dion is plotting against him. So the tyrant exiles Dion.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Plato gets caught in the middle. And here's the wildest part. The young tyrant Dionysius actually keeps Plato there against his will.
Yeah, literally trapped him.
One of history's greatest minds is essentially held hostage as a court pet by his own ungrateful student project. Plato has to beg his old Pythagorean friend Archytas to send a ship and diplomatically intervene just so he can escape.
This raises an important question, though. I mean, the irony is profound. The man who wrote the blueprint for perfect justice finds himself trapped by the messy, paranoid reality of absolute power.
Yeah.
It highlights a brutal friction in his work. Abstract philosophy is pure, but human nature is volatile.
Realizing that trying to fix foreign tyrants is a literal trap, Plato returns to Athens. He pivots.
A smart move.
If he can't fix a state from the top down, he decides to build a school to change minds from the bottom up.
Around 383 BC, he founds the academy in a sacred grove outside the city walls. This tightly organized community of thinkers becomes essentially the prototype for the modern university.
Aristotle himself arrived there as a teenager and stayed for 20 years.
He did.
And it wasn't just somber robes and silent contemplation either. The academy was a highly visible, sometimes controversial part of Athenian culture.
Oh, people definitely made fun of him.
Yeah, comedic playwrights of the time actively mocked them. There's a surviving fragment from a writer named Epicrates describing academy students engaged in a fiercely intense, furrowed-browed debate over trying to properly categorize a pumpkin.
A pumpkin. It was a gentle parody of Plato's method of scientific classification. But beneath the jokes, the academy was where Plato composed his most intricate dialogues. And spending decades writing these masterpieces reveals some fascinating personal contradictions.
Oh, well, massive contradictions. In the Republic, Plato famously argues that a perfect society should banish poets like Homer. He even suggests outlawing loud laughter because art and comedy stir up the irrational appetites and cloud pure reason.
Yet, for a man who claims to deeply distrust art and storytelling, his own writing relies incredibly heavily on mythological narrative.
Exactly. I mean, he invents the story of Atlantis. He writes the myth of Ur. He creates the famous Allegory of the Caves, the story of prisoners mistaking shadows on a wall for reality until one is dragged up into the sunlight. Why does a guy who hates poetry use so much fiction?
It's a pragmatic concession to human psychology.
Ooh.
Plato understood that pure abstract dialectic is dense. Most people cannot grasp the theory of forms through raw logic alone.
They need a story.
They need a bridge. Myths and allegories were his way of translating profound metaphysical truths into a language the appetite and spirit parts of the soul could actually digest.
That makes a lot of sense. But the deepest mystery of his time at the academy isn't what he wrote down. It's what he supposedly refused to write down, the so-called unwritten doctrines.
Yes. According to later students and ancient commentators, Plato believed his absolute highest metaphysical teachings were too complex and perhaps too easily misunderstood to be committed to text.
Wow.
He allegedly only taught these secrets orally to his most advanced students.
So what were they actually discussing off the record?
The sources indicate that in a famous lecture titled On the Good, Plato took his theory of forms to an ultimate conclusion. He identified the good, the supreme form that gives existence to everything else, with the One.
The One.
He argued that a single, unifying mathematical principle of unity was the source of all reality.
So he's basically stripping away the chaotic pantheon of Greek gods and pointing toward a single, unified source of the universe.
Exactly.
It's no wonder he kept that quiet, considering what happened to Socrates when he questioned the state religion.
That oral tradition laid the groundwork for massive shifts in global theology. Plato spent his final years at the academy, dying in his late 70s or early 80s, and was buried in its gardens.
A pretty peaceful inn.
Yeah, but identifying the good with the One created ripples that are almost impossible to measure.
Let's track those ripples because they touch almost everything. During the Islamic Golden Age, his ideas permeated Islamic scholarship. Thinkers like Al-Farabi read the Republic and proposed his own vision of an ideal city governed by spiritually enlightened philosopher-kings.
His work profoundly shaped medieval theology as well. In the 12th century, the great Jewish philosopher Maimonides utilized Platonic and Aristotelian frameworks to reconcile religious faith with rational logic.
And the early Christian church fathers used Platonic concepts of the soul to explain their own theology.
It even bleeds into modern physics.
Right, really?
Physics?
Oh, absolutely. The relentless drive for logical, mathematical simplicity in science has deep Platonic roots. Albert Einstein himself noted that any theoretical physicist taking their work seriously is essentially operating as a Platonist.
Because they're looking for that underlying math.
Exactly. Trusting that beneath the chaotic data of the universe, there is a perfect, elegant mathematical truth waiting to be uncovered. We truly are operating in the margins of his texts. Whether you are debating the ethics of wealth inequality, wondering if your senses are deceiving you, or looking for the unifying theory of physics, you are walking down a path he paved 2,400 years ago.
It's incredible to think about.
Every time you look at a broken political system and think there has to be a perfect ideal we should be striving for, you are channeling the aristocrat who burned his poems to follow a doomed teacher.
Very well said.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, consider one final mind-bending concept from Plato about what's actually happening in your brain right now as you listen to this. In dialogues like the Phaedo, he tackles the concept of epistemology, how we actually acquire knowledge.
Because he believed in the immortality of the soul, he argued that your soul already existed in the realm of the forms before you were born.
Right.
It already knew perfect truth, perfect justice, perfect geometry. But the trauma of being born into a physical body caused you to forget it all.
He called it anamnesis, recollection. He believed that learning isn't about your brain absorbing new facts from the outside world like a sponge. Education is simply the grueling process of forcing your soul to remember what it already knew.
He famously demonstrates this by guiding an uneducated boy through a complex geometrical proof simply by asking him the right sequence of questions. The boy had the knowledge within him. It just required a philosopher to help draw it out.
So think about that the next time you are listening to a deep dive or reading a complex book and you have one of those brilliant, sudden aha moments where a difficult concept just magically clicks into place. Ask yourself, are you truly learning something brand new, or is your soul just finally remembering the truth?